is a language that every child is born to this world knowing and understanding. And in the process of learning how to speak in a linear fashion, learning a culture's language, they slowly forget their innate language. The innate language of a child, of a spirit, is interdimensional in nature and is universal. It's universally understood by all. As individuals adapt to their own culture and language, they distance themselves in various levels from their unconscious language, the language of Bonzel. We see very often the notion in the world when people say a picture says 1,000 words. And we understand that words limit. And once you describe something with words, you diminish it from the gestalt of all that it is. And you put forth constraints on all that it expresses. There is this notion of archetypes, symbols, images that are universal in mankind. There's not a space in the world where you can go and have a snake that is coiled around a pole. But that doesn't mean the release of freedom or health. It's universal in all cultures. There is a collective unconscious for all mankind, where certain symbols mean the very same thing in every culture, regardless of heritage, how people are brought up. It taps into a universal language. And the universal language is a language of eternity. It is not a language that contains or refracts. It's a language that opens up and expands. And since we all come from oneness, we all come from eternity, when we enter into a universal language, then we enter into closer proximity into the energies that align us all in oneness. The dream interpreter is an individual who recognizes the language of archetypes, images, and resonances. And the individual who is empathically aligned with these images and symbols, when they hear the dream, they know how to separate what is central to the dream from that which erupts within the dream as static, based on frustration or wish fulfillment of the individual. It is a process like if you have wheat and you want to make bread, you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. The individual who interprets dreams is an individual who is well versed, empathically aligned with the higher love, and is an individual who is well versed in the iconography and the language of images and pictures. For when spirit wants to communicate to an individual, it does not communicate within the language, the fetishized language of your particular culture. In the English language, there are so many words for money. And if you go to Alaska, there are so many words for snow. And every culture has a predisposition of, based on their energy, they have a plethora of words that shift the focal point of what they resonate. And within our world, you'll find that language is so central to impasses that happen between relationships amongst cultures and nations. And to the degree that they begin to bridge into a common language is the degree that they merge into a common culture with common objectives. It's not a coincidence that whenever there is pretty much, in the United Nations, when countries vote, it's pretty uniform. The countries that speak the same language vote together. And language is something that was spoken about this, that in the archetype of the Tower of Babel, it was a language is a degrading of our resonance as ascended beings, as angels within the physical form. And as we go farther and farther from the light, we define ourselves, and we create more and more definitions to separate each other. And language is a proximity, an indicator of that dissension and that descent. We know that according to the iconography of the archetype of the Tower of Babel, that the divine put forth, according to these archetypes, doesn't matter if it happened this way or not, but it's describing a spiritual phenomenon, that as cultures got together in oneness to do great harm, that the divine removed from them their ability to interconnect with each other. So they wouldn't be able to unify to do great destruction anymore, to abuse their oneness. The solution is that the only way they can realign in oneness is by transcending beyond the temporal languages that the divine manifested to keep them apart. The archetype in the Tower of Babel predicates that originally all men spoke one language. And because they aligned to do great oppression, and it was a danger to the freedom of consciousness of mankind, the divine then introduced 70 facets of language into the world's primary languages. And it's important to understand that this does not relate necessarily to the physical happening, but a spiritual action that happened at a particular point. And that the truth suddenly had 70 faces. And each culture represented a different face of the truth. So each culture carries a spark of light. In the great shattering of the higher light, sparks fell to each culture. And each culture carries a crucial ingredient. And as the cultures learn to transcend the limitations of their separateness and language, they reunite in a higher language, a language of spirit, an empowering language, a language of symbol, a language of eternity. The resonance of a higher love. And as they do that, the sparks have a languishing in their separateness, giving them the source of their own uniqueness. They combine, they connect, they reignite into a higher resonance, even a higher perception for humanity, an ascended consciousness. Those who enter an ascended consciousness know this language well. And this language is a language that is transmitted within the dream state.